This episode brought to you by Progressive. Most of you aren't just listening right now. You're driving, cleaning, and even exercising. But what if you could be saving money by switching to Progressive? Drivers who save by switching save nearly $750 on average. And auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Multitask right now. Quote today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $744 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Name's Podcast, Unsung Podcast. I had to get out of the way immediately. Yeah. Hi, welcome.
Host Mark.
What am I hosting? Parasite, probably.
I think you might be officially hosting a James Bond marathon.
Christ.
If this wad of tree that I've got in my hand is anything to go by. How did you get on?
Failed many data centers.
Did you get to the 10k mark?
Yeah, I did. Uh-huh.
Wow, that's a good word count, man. Well done. So I think Mark might have outdone me for the first time in the history of Unsung Pod.
I think there's one other time. Jay Dilla.
Yeah, that would make sense actually. Yeah, so we are going to start this intro again. Who am I?
You're Chris.
Is there some sort of way to play on Blofeld?
Not that I can think of.
Blowbag.
Blowbag. Why are you the villain? Why can't you just be Felix?
Remember we used to do novelty t-shirts that were like custom made. I would like to do a novelty t-shirt where you're bald and I'm the white cat on your lap. to celebrate this. Mark, are you in 00 heaven this week?
I so am.
Wait a minute, we've got some props this week as well. Mark, take that guitar.
Okay, let me try it.
Get a bit of vibrato in there as well. Or
vibrato in this chord? Oh fuck, that was pish.
It's a bit pedestrian, your delivery there. You're sort of playing it like a busker.
There's a guitar makes you feel like a busker.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We're going to take a deep dive into the musical world.
When was the last time you dusted that guitar?
Mate, I honestly hope you've had tetanus shots, because I'm amazed your fingers are still attached. I've not mentioned that I really don't like acoustic guitars.
No.
I don't like acoustic guitars.
Okay. I mean, that explains everything then.
Yeah, so I have one, but it is somewhat neglected. It's more of a prop, really.
Yeah.
You know, you walk into people's houses and when they get past 40 and they're like, oh, you've got a guitar in your house. Is that to make you look less one-dimensional? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's me.
Mine sits next to my desk in my living room.
Yeah, but it gets used.
Just because I get bored at work. And I'm like, I need to play the James Bond theme tune on repeat.
The crazy thing is, for somebody that plays music, works in music, listens to music, podcasts about music, doesn't matter how bored I don't get bored enough to pick up an acoustic guitar. Back to the matter at hand. Mark, you try it. What are we doing this week?
This week
and next week?
And next week. It feels like it's going to be for the next perpetually. We're talking about the music of James Bond.
And I'll cut that chord in there.
Yeah.
Properly.
That version of the chord.
Your one.
Yeah. We're talking about the music of James Bond, and it's actually really fucking interesting.
It is really, really interesting. We'd sort of teased doing this a while ago, but as with a lot of subjects, we realised that if we're going to do it, we should do it right.
Do you want to explain how we're going to do it initially?
Remind me.
So we were going to do an unsong.
Oh, geez, yeah. Jeez. So we're going to try it in the context of an unsong. Now, bearing in mind, unsongs are ideally meant to be between 15 and 25 minute episodes. I mean, took me 15 to 25 minutes to staple these pages together.
That's how long it took me to spell check.
Yeah, that would not have worked. But yes, I believe it was for the track "The Sun Always Shines on TV" by Aha. And I was going to segue into some James Bond chat, but it was like, no, there's so much to talk about here. And really, there really is. So we're going to come at it from a few different angles. We're going to come at it from a bit of discussion of the history, and then inevitably we'll have to talk a wee bit about the films and the rights and the people that were behind it. But the history of the development of the music, a little bit the technical stuff behind the stuff that you'll know, that you'll recognise, that chord that Mark butchered along with all the other motifs that are very famous. Then we'll do a little bit on tracks that never made it.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty fecund subject in this regard, because
Actually, probably more interesting than some of the tracks that made it.
yeah, potentially, yeah. So there's a lot of really, really interesting nearly men and also rans, things that were disqualified for various technical reasons that would have been very interesting choices of direction for that franchise to go in. We will then go on to discuss in some detail all of the James Bond signature tunes from the various films over the years.
There are 24.
25, I think.
25?
No? I mean, this is canon, non-canon.
There's 26 films. 28, I guess, if you count the 2 non-canon ones. So, yeah, 24 then.
Yeah, by the time we finish this, Christopher Nolan will have rebooted it anyway. So
Twice. Before we go on in this episode, we've got some admin we need to take care of.
okay, yeah.
Rich, welcome.
Welcome to the fold.
Welcome. He joins us on our AAA Unsung Access All Areas £4 or whatever equivalent per month Patreon tier, where you get access to our, like I said, the AAA Unsung Facebook group. We'll talk to you directly if that's really what you really want. And you get episodes early and some bonus episodes too, out of which we've probably got a couple coming up, which we think are really interesting, and one of them is definitely something people have been asking for. Don't know about the other one. But you'll get it anyway. And yeah, I think
you can also join the higher tier, the better people, as part of the Unsung Record Club. We buy albums directly from either independent bands or independent labels. We kind of curate it based on roughly what you tell us you want musically. We're not going to send you hip hop if you detest it. But yeah, we pull stuff from all over the world, bring it together under that umbrella, and then we send it out to you each month. And there's some really, really good stuff in there. Just got a new set of merchandise in today, courtesy of Bandcamp, which is still the most effective way to get money to bands. Even though the shares have changed a little bit, it's still far, far better than the fractions of pennies you get for streaming music. So if you want to try and help bands and us and yourself in the process, join the record club. It's 15 quid a month. You can pay more, but it's 15 quid a month. As I said, we put a lot of hours into this, so you get decent value that way. The bands get money direct into their pockets from you and from us. And yeah, the whole ecosystem thrives. So please consider that. I think it's a worthwhile expense.
yes, indeed.
When I am editing the probable 6 hours of this, I'll have you in my heart, Record Club members. Thank you. Now, to get this underway, Mark, I think some full disclosure is appropriate. I am not a James Bond fan.
That is correct.
Which makes this a bit of a daunting undertaking, right? We actually considered getting somebody in who was a super fan. It didn't really work out. Although I will add, Glynis, who printed these notes for me at the local printers, James Bond super fan. Wow. At least for the Connery stuff. So yeah, little shout out there. Thanks for doing that, Glynis. Had we known sooner, you'd have been on
in for like a 14th of the episode.
Yeah, totally. But in fact, I would go so far as to say that when I was a kid, I actively disliked James Bond.
I think there's a lot to dislike about James Bond.
I mean, I did get a lot of that from my mum. She really hated James Bond. She hated the chauvinism of it, the stupidity of it, the kind of like camp whimsy that it kind of went into for a long period. And I got that as well, because even as a kid, I preferred grittier, harder, darker action stuff. I liked my Aliens and my Blade Runner and even stupid stuff like Tango and Cash and shit like that. But it was just a bit darker and more sinister. James Bond almost seemed a bit pantomime at points, with some of the gadgets especially. But as will become obvious, I have kind of softened my stance on Bond. And actually I've softened my stance on Bond a wee bit in light of the reboots that came out on starring Daniel Craig. because I'm not sure how I really feel about them. We'll get to that. I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse. Mark, I understand you're something of an admirer.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan, but I've seen all the films. I can't remember a few of them, which goes to talk about the quality of what is a very uneven franchise. I actually kind of got into Cars because of The Spy Who Loved Me, and because it's got not the Lotus Esprit.
It's got a Lotus in it.
It's got a Lotus in it, which turned into Submarine, which I thought was cool as fuck as a wee guy. And yeah, I kind of attributed that film to kind of one of the reasons why I liked Cars when I was wee. I like them less so as I get older because they're just fucking noisy and expensive. But yeah, I had a lot of time for some of the Bond films, and as I grew up, I started to kind of realise that the stuff that I liked was kind of the same as what you like, Chris. I like the gritty, the more grounded, you know, and a lot of the earlier stuff is not that at all. And no, let me say that again and keep this in. Most of it is not like that. You know
what cars are good for? Shagging in.
Yeah.
You know what else is good for shagging in? Boats. Do you know,
and spaceships.
10 James Bond films end with James Bond about to have sex on a boat.
Yeah. What a man. I think
I mean, it's a stupid series in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it is a pretty daft series, and if Fleming had lived, I think he would have been quite happy with Daniel Craig's portrayal of Bond.
You don't think he would have been?
I do think he would have been probably the happiest of all the portrayals of Bond. He probably would have thought it was too woke because he'd be old as fuck by this point. But it definitely started to become a parody of itself, and that gets reflected not just in the actors and the casting and in the direction and the scripts, but the way it's received by the general public as well.
It actually gets to the point of high camp in places. Yeah, I mean, I think the new stuff, I take it more seriously. It's intended to be taken more seriously.
Still reverence, so still got reverence for the past in a lot of places, which is good.
It does, to varying degrees. I do think it feels a little bit less special now, though. We'll talk about that a wee bit more as well, I suppose, but we will probably get back to the No Time to Die. In fact, it's probably spoiler warning right now, this episode. If you have not followed James Bond, or you've dipped in and out, or you're midway through binging the history of Bond, you may want to put these episodes of Unsung Podcast on the back burner, because we are going to just trample all over the endings of all of this. So be warned, okay?
You have been warned.
Things that made James Bond special or identifiable in my book: birds, accents, raised eyebrow, tuxedos, gadgets, cats on laps, mentioned that, martinis, cars, you mentioned that, and 53-year-old male leads with 23-year-old female leads.
Yeah, aye. I think that's pretty much the thing that the Daniel Craig Bond reboot sought to save it from, in a large part. Bit. You know,
it was still a bit of a difference, but yeah, it was quite an improvement. But there's one other thing I didn't mention there, and that is music. So,
but yeah, that's the thing. Music is probably the most integral part. It is the defining factor of Bond that gives it the most cultural cachet.
Yeah, I mean, you get all these visual images with Bond, but actually, probably some of the most evocative things you could do to signal Bond to someone, you know,
play that chord.
Is play that chord properly, or any number of the little motifs. Yeah, so the main musical ingredients of James Bond, according to producers, there's 3 of them, right? The first one is theme, and that's the James Bond theme and the various iterations of it.
I think people should probably draw this distinction right now, is that we're not talking about James Bond themes, we're talking about the next thing, which is going to be on your list, which is James Bond songs.
Exactly. So the theme is the James Bond theme, that famous bit of music that has all these little parts in it that since then have been kind of pulled out and pulled apart and teased out into the background of things and woven into tracks and stuff like that. That track's been in every film since Dr. No. We'll explain what it is exactly and how it came about shortly. as Mark says, there's then James Bond songs, the main song for each film specifically, because it became a convention with Bond that there'd be a flagship track for each movie.
Goldfinger, he's the man with the most breath. Golden eye, I found his weakness. Golden eye, he'll do what I please. Let the sky fall when it crumbles. We will stand tall.
That actually served a huge part with regards to the publicity and the promotion of each film. That track would come out, it would be announced, there'd be a buzz with that. They tried, in a lot of cases, not all cases, to make it coincide with musicians who also had a bit of buzz about them. There was an element of kingmaker to it, as I would suggest as well, in recent years. We'll spend most of the time discussing that. And there's a third factor as well, and that's score.
Mm-hmm.
How you approach the general score, for example. There's like eras of James Bond. You've got strings, you've got brass, you've got electronic, you've got modern, you've got a kind of classic approach. The 60s was kind of known more for brass, whereas in the 70s and into the 80s, it became much softer and stringy and more romantic. The scoring generally reworks themes from that James Bond theme that I mentioned earlier on, and often also includes elements of whatever the main song is from that particular iteration of the film. We'll talk about a couple of examples of that. An interesting detail, a little bit of trivia to put in here would be that, for example, in the final film, or the final film to date, Billie Eilish's vocal appears in the score, and that's the only time that's happened in the history of James Bond, that you have the actual voice of the song singer over the score. Well, look at Casino.
Another wee bit of trivia that kind of fits in quite nicely with that. So Sheena Easton also did a James Bond theme, and she's the only artist to have actually appeared in a James Bond film.
That's right. Roger Moore said she was sexier than the actual James Bond.
Yeah, but she's only in the intro credits, in the famous.
Tied to a chair for the mouth close-up.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
They lashed her to a chair so she couldn't move. Aye. Well, actually, as regards to the score thing, we'll go into a wee bit of depth on the film Casino Royale, the reboot of Casino Royale, to kind of illustrate some interesting points.
Can I jump in here with a little bit, expanding a little bit on my own thoughts about the whole theme and how that kind of works? When Chris talks about Casino Royale there, like, there's basically been two main James Bond composers, and we'll go into some detail on this further down the line. There's been John Barry, and there's been more recently David Arnold, who hasn't been involved for 3 films now. But the reason I think it's really important to talk about, they'll break it down to theme, song and score, is because with some exceptions, that's been the one person that's been responsible for all those things. That, for me, creates like a really fascinating interplay between like the song and the film at the start, and then you're waiting for the cues for the actual Bond theme, and then obviously the score is a completeness of bringing those two things together within an actual film, and it happens in so many different ways, like you said, across all 25 films. And sometimes it happens at the start, sometimes it happens at the end, sometimes it never really happens, you know what I mean? And
sometimes it's quite strategic as well.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool, you know. But whenever it's played, right, it's always played when Bond does something Bond-esque, right? And that's the way it's played, even outside of Bond, when the character does something Bond-esque.
To emphasise the Bondness was a phrase that I saw used.
Yeah, and that's, like, I think that's the thing that gives Bond the music, the theme, and the aforementioned songs and score a huge amount of cultural cachet. You know, it's such an integral part of the films, and I think people don't really realise how much of an integral part it is to the cinematic language of all of the films. And when it doesn't work, you can fucking tell as well, and we will talk about that in the next episode when we go through the films. That's why it's good to think about these as 3 distinct things that work together to form the greater Bond brand. Yeah,
it seems like a much more integrated process than would take place in the majority of films.
Yeah.
Now's the time to save 30% on wedding jewelry, only on BlueNile.com. Make sure your wedding ring is the one with your pick of diamond and lab-grown diamond bands, all hand-finished and graded for excellence. Or surprise her with something blue she'll love for life, like a stunning pair of sapphire earrings. Blue Nile's jewelry experts are available 24/7 to help, from fit questions to style advice. Right now, get up to 30% off at BlueNile.com. BlueNile.com.
This episode brought to you by Progressive. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity, much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these two policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier and could help you save too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save over $775 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, and even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $779 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Quickly, the Bond franchise itself. So I'm sure you've heard the name Albert R. Broccoli, also known as Cubby Broccoli. Mm-hmm. And a guy called Harry Saltzman. So they got the rights to Ian Fleming's books and set up Eon Films in 1961. Saltzman actually worked the first 9 Bond films. Broccoli did them all, bar what we'll call 2 non-canon movies that come later. We'll go into that. Broccoli, by the way, only really made Chitty Chitty Bang Bang of note outside of it.
That's right.
Has he got any other big films?
No, I think Bond became his legacy thing.
Yeah.
You know? It's actually quite interesting, this Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, because that's a Roald Dahl book, which I think Ian Fleming actually worked on that film. It's based on the book Chitty Chitty Bang Bang by Ian Fleming.
All right, so it was another one of him. Yeah. I guess in some respects he became a little bit of a one-trick pony. Saltzman, even though he did fewer Bond films, had actually worked on quite a lot of other celebrated projects, including a film you might have heard of called The Ipcress File. Bond fans, I think, from what I've read anyway, feel that Saltzman's Bond legacy has been treated a bit harshly by Eon and the sort of Broccoli estate. Broccoli estate. Sounds delicious. And Broccoli passed the rights for Bond on to his daughter Barbara in 1995, who continues to run that now. So that established kind of leads us in to the James Bond theme itself. Now, I think probably an interesting question to just kick us off here, Marcus. Is the Bond theme the single most recognisable and recurring bit of music in cinema?
Absolutely, yeah.
Even off the top of your head, can you think of anything that rivals it?
No. And there's actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but go with me in this, right? A lot of modern blockbuster films aim for having the iconic theme. Mm-hmm. One criticism that's been levelled at Marvel, actually, for this entirety of its films thus far, is that it's never had a distinctive sonic imprint.
Which is interesting because Superman and Batman both
did. Have it.
That's become like a real signature there.
And they use that in every single film that he's in at some point, or every single property he's involved in, like Bond, and same for Superman as well.
Star Wars absolutely nailed it. Nailed it. And Star Wars has continued to use that through different... Yeah, you're right, there's multiple actually. But it's continued to use that through different areas of the franchise as well to
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, very, very strong.
But I think, Bond is probably the most enduring legacy just by dint of how important music is to those films, even though there's never really music in those films. Well, there are in some of them, but it's never really an integral component of the plot. But it's just such a part of who that person is and what that brand stands for. Those other films, maybe Star Wars is the exception. The Imperial March, for example, you can't, like Darth Vader's on screen, that's played.
Also, you have the big fanfare intro. The writing scroll is like a big moment for Star Wars fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I probably would say Bond is the most recognisable.
Yeah, probably is. So, Mark mentioned John Barry. Another character here is Monty Norman.
Monty Norman.
He gave up singing with big bands to go and write musicals after he realised he had a wee bit of a knack for writing. Eon knew about him and had gotten in touch with him, and they ended up flying him to Jamaica to see and work on this production of a new film called Dr. No. The origins of the James Bond theme, which by now you've heard when I've been cutting it in, are taken from Norman's song called Bad Sign, Good Sign, which is about a man called Mr. Biswas who had an unlucky sneeze. It was part of a production called The House for Mr. Biswas that was set in India, and the original has loads. It's played in sitars and things like that.
Drawer, because we didn't use it. Went to my bottom drawer, found this number that I'd always liked, and played it to myself. And I was born with this unlucky sneeze, and what is worse, I came into the world the wrong way round. Pundits all agree that I'm the reason why my father fell into the village pond and drowned.
But he just heard something in this that suggested to him, I should recycle that and use it in a slightly more fitting way. But Monty Norman apparently kind of struggled with dramatic music a bit, and he was also struggling with the movie deadline. So Saltzman and Broccoli brought in this guy John Barry to try and help pull things all together.
Yeah, he arranged it and he composed it and did the band leading and the recording as well, didn't he?
Yeah, so he was a big band composer, and he went to meet Monty Norman and he listened to a whole bunch of Monty Norman's stuff. Said he took those ideas home with him, worked on them overnight, then went back into the studio the next day. And Barry is credited technically with the quote dynamic arrangement for the theme. Now John Barry later sued Monty Norman, disputing who wrote the theme, and Barry lost the case, but then maintained, well, why did they invite him back to write the next X many number of movies if he didn't actually write it? I mean, John Barry stayed working with Bond for 25 years, didn't he?
Did, yeah. Whenever he had to do something else, he always came back.
Yeah. Ended up, he kind of handed in his notice with a full page advert in something like the New York Times, thanking Albert Broccoli for the opportunity for 25 years, and then signed it.
I think it was Aha that broke him as well. I legitimately think it might have been Aha that broke him.
So here's a fun anecdote as well about John Barry. So Michael Caine went to stay with John Barry.
Yes.
Apparently Michael Caine had to go and stay with John Barry because Michael Caine's previous flatmate was fed up of all the birds that were passing
shagging too much.
So Michael Caine woke up on the first night staying at John Barry's house to the sound of John Barry composing on his piano. And Caine talks about how he was like, oh God, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. Is this going to go on all the time? And the next morning he gets up and John Barry's like, oh, I finished. And he's like, wow. And he played him Goldfinger, the melody from Goldfinger. Michael Caine was the first person other than John Barry to ever hear that. Soon after, Barry, who worked with musicians at the time, was doing a tour with Shirley Bassey, and at the end of the tour he played her Goldfinger and told her what he was working on and asked her to get involved. I think John Barry and Shirley Bassey were an item for a while as well. I'm pretty sure about that. Shirley Bassey from Wales, who I can't help but notice has an almost German sounding accent now. I don't know, it's just because her upper lip was sort of not very mobile or something, but she talks like that. It's very weird. Anyway, John Barry and a guy called Don Black became a bit of a key James Bond team. Don Black, by the way, wrote Michael Jackson's first number one, Ben.
Well, Ben, you're always running here and there. You feel you're not wanted anywhere.
So just on the song of Goldfinger, even though Shirley Bassey sings it, she wasn't the original singer of the song. The lyrics were written by Anthony Newley, and that's maybe one thing we'll talk about when we talk about the Almost songs. Have you heard his version?
Goldfinger, he's the man with the Midas touch, a spider's touch.
John Barry didn't like it because he sounded creepy on it, and he does, to be fair. It does sound creepy, but it's the exact same recording, just different vocal, same lyrics, roughly the same vocal lines as well, just delivered really differently. And he was like, no, I want to give it to Shirley Bassey, maybe because they were an item. And he was like, she's also a great singer, to be fair. But yeah,
absolutely. So as we said, John Barry and Don Black became this key team. By the way, another little segue here, James Bond's theme was controversially remixed by Moby for Tomorrow Never Dies. That was quite a big deal and controversial amongst fans at the time.
It was also, and it's never been released, it was also re-recorded by Eric Clapton and Vic Flick at the behest of Michael Kamen in 1989.
So Moby, despite doing it, seems a bit bemused as to why it was actually necessary. I mean, he took the job, but he was like, I don't see the point here. And he agrees that the original is much better than the remix. So the original arrangement of this song, as we say, it was used in every film since that original Dr. No, the James Bond theme, right? So since 1962. The track is basically an overt 1940s film noir callback, and that's sort of to try and match this debonair playboy spy that they have. The tune's composed in E minor. There'll be a bit of technical stuff in here, folks. The orchestration clearly shows John Barry's background and actually Monty Norman's background
Big band
jazz, especially things like the swing drums that are in it. And when the drum swing kicks in, they also use a kind of call response between parts of the band. To have guitar though along with a big band was really unusual.
Yeah,
because
that brings it into pop, because it's like a surf guitar, which was kind of the thing at the time. You know,
it's got that Dick Dale to it, isn't it? Or totally. The Shadows and stuff like that. Yeah,
it was Vic Flick that played that riff.
Yep. So guitar played by Vic Flick, and he was paid £6 as a flat fee for that performance.
Am I right in saying that? So when Monty went to Jamaica and he did visit Fleming and Goldeneye, which his house was called Goldeneye, which is weird.
That's right. Yeah.
He actually was really taken by the musicians there as well, and they actually play.
Yeah, he used local musicians from the kind of area where they were hanging out in Jamaica doing the filming. That's right. There are no strings or piano in the original, but those did become a feature in later kind of versions of the song. The original version uses vibes. The actual, not vibes as in like
so
the kind
vibes.
of hey man, cool vibes, but like actual vibes, the instrument, which are then reused in some of the future theme tunes as a bit of a callback. Also, an interesting thing about it, when the trumpets go right up the octaves into what's called the altissimo region of trumpet playing, it's apparently a thing that Duke Ellington was really well known for doing, right? But supposedly it's really, really hard to play up there on a trumpet, or to play cleanly. You get a lot of squeaks and a lot of cracks, but to be able to play trumpet at that register takes a lot of talent. So the people that were doing it had to like have their shit together to be able to do that.
There's another thing I want to note about this Bond theme, is that it actually takes a lot of influence from Bossa Dorado, the song Bossa Dorado. Which was written by the violinist Dorado Schmidt, and that's the reason why this song uses that flat 6, 6, flat 7, 6 chord progression. It comes directly from, he's a jazz player. I think he plays guitar as well, but he's mostly known as a violinist. If you listen and cut in a snippet of Bossa Dorado, you'll be able to hear a clear influence on the guitar sounds that are on the James Bond theme, which is quite interesting.
So you've obviously mentioned the main chord progression there. So there's this kind of modal chord progression based in E minor. To use technical terminology here, there's a minor triad top note that moves up and down between 5th sharpened and the 6th degree of the scale. Basically, to Joe Bloggs, it sounds like somebody sneaking about.
I can play it.
There's also a more complex version that includes a bass note, which is a minor tonic, then a 6th, then a major 4th and back, right? So that 3-chord progression is developed and referenced in at least 15 of the main James Bond sort of, not themes, but
songs.
Movie songs. They make reference to that. One that's a good example is the Chris Cornell song. uses that progression quite a lot. There's also, it's really evident in the bass line of Adele's Skyfall.
Yeah. Piano part.
And it can be heard in a track that we'll talk about later on, Spectre by Radiohead.
Yeah, that's the way they use it is actually really good.
Yeah, so
Chris Cornell is actually the very famous Bond motif, which is the 3-note motif. Chris Cornell sings that melody, which you would never think to sing. We'll talk about that next episode. But
you've got the spy chord that Mark attempted earlier on. E minor major 9th.
Yeah, E minor major 9th.
And you've got the big blasts. That's something that often gets forgotten.
That's one of my favourite parts.
Yeah, so C sharp minor 7 flat 5 is the big blasts, which I think it's underestimated how key a signature they are. So even in that one piece of music, there's 4 different really identifiable motifs. You got the rising chord, the rising and sinking main chords. You got the down 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 down. You got that. You got the spy chord at the end, which was used to transition between scenes and things. And you've got those That's a fucking lot for one piece of music. The fact that every single one of those is identifiable,
and that 3-note motif as well. That
which is the high version of those roots. Yeah. So other recurring musical themes in the series, because there are a few more that they tried to get a bit of traction. You've got a piece called James Bond is Back. That comes from Russia with Love, which is kind of swishy 60s tat. That it did get a wee bit of repeat usage, but it didn't catch on in anything like the same way as the main theme. You've got a thing called the 007 theme. Which is, the full name of it is 007 Takes the Lector. I'm assuming the Lector was a car in the series somewhere.
I don't know.
Anyway, so that was again used in From Russia with Love, and is actually a play on music from Magnificent Seven originally. And you've got the David Arnold suspense motif that's used in a lot of the newer movies. Which is this 4-note descending motif that he wrote into especially the more recent James Bond films. Now, we mentioned earlier on Bond scoring, and by that we don't mean him shagging, because there's plenty of that, but the scoring of James Bond films is really interesting because, as Mark said, partly because the musical directors were, had such kind of oversight of the projects that they were very consistent projects, but also there was a lot of effort made in the better examples, I will say, to try and make the score travel with the narrative. This sounds daft because a lot of people will look at James Bond films and they're clownish in a lot of cases. But in the better examples of this, the scoring really does progress with one eye on what's happening in the film itself. There's a constant reference back and forth between the different texts of these films, and I think one of the best examples is probably that Daniel Craig Casino Royale, because Casino Royale was charting the emergence of James Bond as a formed character. So it's really interesting the way they tease parts of what we recognise as James Bond music and signifiers out during that film.
Because he's not James Bond yet, so you haven't earned it.
Yeah, he's not 007. Yeah. So, for example, they do it in the script itself, so he gets asked his name but avoids saying Bond, James Bond. He just says
something Beach, Harry Beach, I think,
something like that. Yeah. And likewise, there's a bit where he's asked what drink he wants, and I think he says like vodka soda or something like that. Then the waiter says to him, shaken stirred, and he's like, do I look like I give a shit or something like that? So there's clever kind of pulling the rug from under the audience, taking these things away from them. And the music does the exact same thing. The music's very patient. It doesn't give you the payoffs too early. It's not until I think the very end of the movie,
last scene of the
when
film.
it's like sort of, who are you? And he's like, I'm Bond, James Bond, and then it's da-dan, boom, da-dan, and that's him arrived. And so yeah, the music echoes the plot really quite cleverly. Like I mean, as somebody that I actually quite like Casino Royale, I think it's definitely
really, really good
one
film.
of the best installments of the whole thing. And I hadn't ever really considered how much thought had been put into that stuff until I went and watched. There's a couple of good documentaries that go into a lot of James Bond music. So
Yeah, what was John Barry's whole thing, you know, even from Dr. No, not just the fact that the music's got a kind of Jamaican feel in places, but also he was actually really, really interested and really kind of taken by that idea that the theme, when it's kind of taken apart, that it's done so in different ways as well throughout each film, just to kind of keep that musical signature relevant without overdoing it, you know. And I think that's a really clever way of doing like scores, which I'd imagine that comes from his background in musical theatre or musical films, which is very much all about that. You know, it's all about this idea of bringing in, you know, each character's got a theme, or each moment's got a theme, or the main theme will jump in and out of the film, you know. That very much comes from that. And I think that's probably something
it's also like that's a very operatic thing.
Definitely.
Because you know, ballet and things where dialogue was not to the fore, you relied on character themes, like musical character themes, to signal the arrival or even just the summoning or the relevance of a character in a scene.
Yeah.
You know, they created an association between a sound, and that also was often tied to the personality of the character and the behaviour of the character. So it's actually it's got a lot of history and a lot of depth to it as a trope.
Yeah, I think basically John Barry is very much a musical guy, like musical guy, you know.
Yeah, and because he got so into the weeds is why he was trusted repeatedly with this franchise.
This episode brought to you by Progressive. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity. Much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these two policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier and could help you save too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save over $775 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, and even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $779 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
There's also an interesting thing that's sometimes overlooked in Bond films, because it's such a coveted thing to be able to do a Bond title track or lead, you know, promotional track, whatever you want to call it. They sometimes ended up with more than they knew what to do with. So what they often did was put a big tune at the end credits as well. There's a couple of really interesting examples of this. Well, there's a number, but two I picked out was 11 Daylights has the Pretenders' If There Was a Man, which was written by John Barry and Chrissie Hynde at the end of it.
If there was a man I could dream of, I'd dream about a dream come true.
They wrote two songs together,
Did they?
Pretenders and John Barry, yeah. That one made it in the film.
And License to Kill has a track called If You Asked Me To by Patti LaBelle that became a bit of a fan favourite over the years.
Might change my mind and let you in my life forever. If you ask me to, I just might give my heart and stay here in your arms.
Another good example is We Have All the Time in the World.
We have all the time in the world, time enough for life to unfold.
Which was
Louis
written,
Armstrong.
yeah, written by John Barry for Louis Armstrong for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but that isn't the Bond song for that film. It's just got an instrumental song at the start. I read somewhere that apparently nobody wanted to do the Bond song for that film. I don't know if that's true, but John Barry wrote it for Louis Armstrong, who was in bad health when he sang it.
Actually, we'll go into that in a wee bit of detail when we get round to the episodes.
Yeah, I think I guess the other thing I'd say is that I know we've spoken a lot about John Barry, but the only reason that he was never involved in a film was because he had to go into something else, and the people that came in to replace him, which we'll talk about when we go through the songs.
Well, actually, no. Did you know his esophagus not rupture at one point, and he ended up missing something because
that was for Spy Who Loved Me, I think.
Yeah.
And the other one was the one with George Martin, Live and Let Die. I think he had tax issues. No, he was away directing another film. And then the one with Bill Conti, the guy who did the Rocky soundtrack, I can't remember which film that is.
That's
We'll
right.
talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about it when we go through the songs.
We will.
That was when he had tax issues.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, so I think the reason that it's important to talk about him is because he had also the control, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And when people who came in to do it were either recommended by him or...
There's a wee bit of a gatekeeper thing because he was very trusted. So I think, having covered all of that sort of stuff, we can probably afford to have a little bit of fun here, because one question that did occur to me was, who should have done a Bond song?
Yeah.
Now, it's fun for us, but we also put that to the AAA group on the Unsung page. But we got some really good suggestions from that.
We did. We got ridiculous suggestions as well.
Yeah, Circle Jerks, I think, was tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I'm here for it, man.
I think my personal favourite actually came from Vicky, a co-host, who
Death Grips.
No, Death Grips. No. Again, I think she was tongue in cheek there.
I think that'd be really fucking cool, by the way.
The Black Heart Procession, who we've covered in this show before. And so, for the example, their album Amore del Tropico, the entire thing is like a film noir detective mystery. So it's almost like you had a full album that was intended to be sort of lightly referencing James Bond and other similar sort of gumshoe type things from the 40s and 50s. But that album is really effective. It also has a slightly Caribbean element to it. And I think it just proves that band had a knack for that, albeit they're absolutely far too low profile a band to ever even have a sniff. Something that's maybe on a similar theme, but certainly had the profile to maybe be asked, and maybe one day would be asked, is Nick Cave.
Just look away. They're bringing out the dead now. It's been a strange.
That's a really interesting suggestion. I'm not sure if, well, we're going to talk about Radiohead later on, so I suppose that like all bets are off, because I'm surprised that Radiohead would want to do a Bond thing, given that it could be a bit passé and a bit corny. So Nick Cave I would associate with this, I would class in with the same thing. If Radiohead would do it, well, maybe he would do it. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking that he probably wouldn't want to. He might. I think a lot of people would admit to liking those films more than you maybe even realise, and Radiohead being a good example. But one thing there's like a good documentary on Amazon called The Sound of 007, and one thing that's quite cool about that is... Can we just call it an infomercial and just call it what it is, please? It's a documentary that clearly only got green lit if it was effusive about the instalment at the time.
Oh yeah, because it was released alongside it.
Yeah.
And also it was released for the 60th. But I think it's a pretty good documentary, and they talk about, and they kind of discuss a little bit in that, how like people that you wouldn't really think would be Bond fans actually are, like Jack White, for example. You'd imagine that guy would go no fucking where near that, and yet he did, so probably more people out there that like it and would be up for it than you would imagine. Like Lana Del Rey said that she wanted to do one, and she did want to be considered for Spectre.
Yeah, so Shirley Manson gave her a shout, and as did our pal Rosie gave her a shout. And actually, I'm not the biggest Lana Del Rey fan in the world, but she would very much suit that.
There is a song called 24 that she wrote and released around about the same time as Spectre, which some people out there think is kind of her attempt at doing a James Bond song.
There's only 24 hours, and that's not enough to lie like you lie.
But she named it after a superior spy thriller.
Well, it was also the 24th Bond film, Spectre,
All right, okay.
which is interesting.
It's nothing to do with Jack Bauer.
No, but yeah, I think that's I think it's quite interesting that there are people out there who have been dying to do it and just haven't been asked, and apparently Radiohead were one of them.
Yeah. We had another suggestion that I thought was very strong was Portishead.
I wouldn't fly. I don't think it'd fly now, but I think in the 90s it would have been fucking banging.
I've been a temptress too long. Yes. Give me a reason to love you.
I'll actually reference Portishead when we're talking through the actual tracks that did come out with Bond films, and I think Portishead's weird sort of, again, it seems like a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also there is a real reverence as well. They allude to so many of the songs that I associate with James Bond, the kind of Shirley Bassey thing. Like even in the first couple of Portishead albums, Beth Gibbons likes that whole "How can I?" that really brassy sort of cabaret type approach to vocals. And yeah, Portishead is a really good shout. Davy Bright had mentioned Björk. I'm not sure I'm on that with you.
I think Bjork did a good job. I think so. He also mentioned Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who I think are going to get the gig at some point or another.
I would agree, but for all the wrong reasons. I would agree because, yes, but that's because I think all of Hollywood is converging on one big grey mulch. I'd seen a Blank Mass mentioned. Sure, he'd be pretty chuffed with that.
Colin Stetson.
Collins, nah, it's the thing with a Bond tune. If you look at the ones that have really worked, I mean, we're not talking about scoring. You're talking about the big, bold lead tune. You know, it does need it. Also, it needs a central figure as well. It needs a voice to it. I mean, Black Mass would have to team up with somebody for that one, I think. Mazzy Star.
Breathless and torn, I could feel my eyes turning into dark.
Maybe a little bit too subdued, but, you know, sexy, I suppose, in that kind of wispy kind of way. We'll talk about Muse. They do seem an obvious contender, and there's a reason
They
for
did
that.
throw their hat in the ring.
Aye, absolutely.
I've tried to.
Mike Patton was mentioned, and I think Mike Patton would have worked
Unconventional.
really
mode.
well.
Gotta wash away the taste of every day. Wash it away.
He's certainly no stranger to doing stuff that's a little bit kind of wine-barring.
Oh yeah, he loves a croon.
Lovage has got a bunch of that. Evidence and King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime, that would have really suited it.
I'm also thinking about it from a scoring perspective as well, and I think people like Mike Patton and also Colin Stetson would be particularly effective at that, even if they don't do the main song. You know what I mean?
Ian Sanderson Thornton mentioned that Manson, no, that's Man's Son.
Man's Son.
Their album Attack of the Grey Lantern always sounded quite Bond-esque. So there's a lot of good suggestions came
Godspeed.
in. Well, Godspeed was not one of the good suggestions. I'm sorry. That falls into that category of like Colin Stetson. It's like, where's the central lead here? This is great music, but no.
Mine's are obvious. Prince. I think Prince Brother.
First ring of the alarm in weeks, by the way.
He did Batman. He did Batman soundtrack, and Batman's is a cracking song.
Yeah.
It would have been perfect in the 80s.
Also, let's be honest, the Sheena Easton song sounds like Prince wrote it.
You think so?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or
Bowie.
Bowie.
Would have been a stick on, I think. You know, Bowie, Bowie, whatever.
By the way, somebody up in the street outside my house had the sign up. This is a true story. Sorry for the segue, because I know this is going to be long anyway. But I was walking down the road, and this poor wee bastard, there's a wee cat missing in my area just now. Wee black and white cat with a wee pink bell thing, right? Answers to the name Bowie. I'm like, What if it doesn't? What if it's like, you fucking pronounce it Bowie? So there's all these people going around the streets going, Bowie, Bowie. And the cat's like, I'm not fucking coming home till you learn how to say my fucking name right.
Queen.
Well, I actually don't even know if I think Queen. I think Freddie Mercury. You know, Freddie Mercury embarked on a bunch of stuff as solo. I think Freddie Mercury himself, you know, in the same ways he did Barcelona and stuff like that. I think
Flash Gordon, mate.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Princess of the Universe.
aye, but it's too rocking. And don't get me wrong, I know there are examples of rocking James Bond themes, but Freddie Mercury was sort of able to collaborate with much more orchestral stuff when he went solo. That's why I'm using Barcelona as the example. And I think a James Bond theme that was much more classically arranged than Queen, but with him fronting it. 'Cause it's all about the voice and the charisma of the voice, I think. On that note, I would have said, I actually think Meatloaf would have done a decent job at James Bond.
Yeah. Musically a bit too I can't believe I'm going to say a bit too bombastic where you've got fucking Goldfinger.
Yeah, this is the thing. If you think back to some of the 80s stuff, I actually think Meatloaf doing a Bond theme in the 80s
He should have, because some of them are fucking so boring, man.
I mean, Jim Steinman could have done a good Bond theme.
Yeah,
he could definitely have done a good Bond theme. Frank Sinatra never did one. He got offered.
Some trivia about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go into that, but it's amazing that he didn't do it, really. I think Stevie Nicks, you know, just we were talking about, you know, strong females. Roxette would have been good for the kind of 80s stuff. I think you know, okay, so A View to a Kill, spoiler alert, one of the best Bond tunes, right? Grace Jones is in that film and didn't sing it, which
pretty remarkable.
Is pretty remarkable.
He shadows me back home. Footsteps echo on the stone. Rainy night.
I think Pat Benatar would have been brilliant.
Pat Benatar, yeah.
Really good. Ann Wilson, or even just the full band Heart. Talking about
Heart would have been good.
Yeah, really strong female performances. And the last one, which seems self-evident really, is Bonnie Tyler.
Yeah.
Who nearly did.
Steinman, aye.
She nearly did a Bond theme, yeah.
Another one for me, Led Zeppelin.
Really?
Yeah, Plant's voice. Maybe just Plant, actually.
Maybe just Plant.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those situations where the voice definitely has the charisma required, but I'm not sure if the band themselves have the chops to do it. Like, it just doesn't really suit their sound. But the person, yeah, definitely.
Plant, I think Page would have been able to arrange something really nice as well. So Plant and Page together, they still could do it. Seems unlikely at this point, to be honest, given the way it's been going for the past 5 films.
Jimmy Page might or might not have played on a James Bond theme tune.
Oh yeah, I think he did play.
Yeah,
He was early in the room when one
was recorded. Exactly. Now, there's probably a few people yelling at their podcasting device, whatever that is, laptop, radio, whatever. So we'll address some names of people who actually, believe it or not, did do or attempt to do Bond themes, but for one reason or another didn't make the cut.
Mm-hmm. The rejected themes.
Let's start with the biggie. And actually, maybe rejected actually isn't the right word here, but we're going to start with a biggie, Amy Winehouse. So it's worth saying that Amy Winehouse was strongly linked with the Quantum of Solace music, which was being written by her and Mark Ronson, but was never actually finished. Ronson pulled those sessions, saying that Amy, quote, wasn't ready to do a recording. The Bond producers, actually, I think it's maybe even Barbara Broccoli, was describing Amy having taken notes at a meeting about what emotions this was meant to evoke, and it was like loss, regret, all that, and she'd just written Blake on a piece of paper that she left behind when she left the meeting. And yeah, and so instead of Amy Winehouse doing it, which just does seem like an incredible missed opportunity, the producers went with the Jack White tune.
Yeah, so there's a song that Shirley Bassey released. She released an album around about the same time called the album's called The Performance, and the song is called No Good About Goodbye. So apparently David Arnold had actually started working on a James Bond theme. I mean, he'd only done a couple. He'd obviously just done a Chris Cornell one as well. He binned it when he heard it. They went with Jack White and Alicia Keys.
There'll always be a space, a fact I have to face now.
Later, Shirley Bassey decided to do a record and she asked David Arnold to produce it. David Arnold kind of basically resurrected that song, got Don Blackhead to do the lyrics, and then they recorded that tune. So if you go and hear that song, if you go and listen to that song, No Good About Goodbye, It sounds a bit like a Bond song because it was written by people who are involved quite heavily with Bond. There is an alternate reality where Shirley Bassey could have done a song for that film.
Yeah.
But it just was never meant to be.
Would have been her fourth. So talking about alternate realities, Johnny Cash's Thunderball.
Yeah.
There's a man who could stop the thing in time. He's known by very few, but he's feared by all in crime. All in
Thank fuck they didn't go there, by the way.
It sounds like it's for a Western, man.
It sounds more like it's for Smokey and the Bandit than James Bond.
I think it was never taken seriously as being in contention.
I know. I mean, I get that Johnny Cash was hot property at the time, so it ticks that box. But we would be living in a very different future at this point.
And that's for the film Thunderball, of course, which we'll talk about in the next episode. Tom Jones did the song for. But the best song is the song I didn't fucking use.
Yes.
It's Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
He's tall and he's dark, and like a shark, he looks for trouble. That's why the zero's double. Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Which is just, it's actually a really good song.
And there's two other versions of that. There's Dionne Warwick and there's Shirley Bassey.
Yeah, Shirley Bassey's version was too short.
He's tall and he's dark, and like a shark, he looks for trouble. That's why the zero's double. Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
He's tall and he's dark, and like a shark, he looks for trouble. Fucking honestly, man. Honestly, I swear people in the past were just actual fucking morons. Like, just like today. He's tall and he's dark, and like a shark, he looks for trouble. The famous sharks that look for trouble. Tall and dark.
Yeah.
But I mean, in fairness, this tune, it has attracted quite a cult following, and it was included in the official album version of the score. It's got all the requisite instrumentation, the brass blasts, even if it is a bit campy. Although I understand that Shirley Bassey was furious about Dionne Warwick's version and sued Eon and basically got it blocked from certain usage. So I think if you get the standard edition of the soundtrack, it's the Warwick version, and if you get the high fidelity edition of the soundtrack, it's the Shirley Bassey version. I'm also, Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I'm not sure if that's maybe the inspiration behind the film by Shane Black.
I don't know. Do you know why it's called Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang? Because there was reviews at the time. There was a review at the time. It was called James Bond Mr. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is why they used that as a song, which is pretty cool.
Well, it seems likely though that would have influenced the title of that film.
Yeah, but the reason they never used this for this song is because they wanted the song to have the title of the film in it.
Yeah, well, which became a big thing. More often than not, the track to have the film's name in it. Although I think that I saw people making comments about how they were glad they didn't get the Quantum of Solace.
Yeah. What's that rhyme with? I think Simon Le Bon said bollocks.
Nice bollocks.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest he's not in the polis.
Yeah.
Quantum of Solace, he's not in the polis.
Yeah. I think I prefer this song to Thunderball, right? Tom Jones's version, which is a bit wishy-washy. Spoiler alert for the next episode. But I think Bassey's quite subdued on this compared to Goldfinger, like vocally, which I think gives it a really interesting dynamic between the two songs and the two films.
Goldfinger, such a cold finger.
Yeah.
Man with the Midas touch, a spider's touch. Some
touch.
More classic lyricism there.
Yeah.
This episode brought to you by Progressive. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity. Much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these two policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier and could help you save too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save over $775 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, and even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $779 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
It was a different time, mate.
One that really kind of blew my mind, the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. The track Pet Sounds.
So this is what Brian Wilson says, right? And Brian Wilson's done a lot of fucking drugs in his life.
He's a bit burnt out, aye.
Yeah, he claims he wrote that to be a James Bond song.
Run James Run was the name of it,
yeah.
aye.
But it is actually the song Pet Sounds on the album Pet Sounds, and it's the same song. Like there was no change.
Yeah,
you know.
He was a really big fan of Thunderball, reportedly, and he also wrote another unrelated tune that came out in 2017 with the same name, Run James Run.
He's done a lot of drugs, that boy.
He's a little bit burnt out.
Yeah, I think if they would have used that, it would have been a radical fucking departure, like super radical.
Imagine that and Johnny Cash.
I know. Well, what are these guys doing? I think it's just too quirky. It's got the Beach Boys quirkiness, even though it was a bit darker in places. Then you'd be like, that doesn't really work, mate. It just lacks the drama, and I can see why I didn't use it. It's a pretty cool song, but I can see why they didn't use it.
Yeah.
On You Only Live Twice, because that's the film. Lorraine Chandler
and
did.
Julie Rogers.
Yeah,
both did.
The story behind Lorraine Chandler is really fucking interesting, right? So it's the same song, You Only Live Twice.
Yeah, it's her version's class, man.
It's good. It's really
her
good.
version is kind of Motown and like soul pop. It's got a really cool minor progression in the verse. It rolls in a bunch of little elements from the James Bond theme, so it ticks that box as well.
It feels very of its time, though. I think
it does.
Yeah, Goldfinger and Thunderball, as much as Thunderball was a bit pish, feel a bit timeless.
Yeah, but I mean, I honestly think the Lorraine Chandler version would have been a really strong choice. Julie Rogers has not got the same Motown ingredients. It's totally competent. It's got different instrumentation, and it's very slightly sort of like Far Eastern. It's got slightly Chinese. So they use instruments from the Far East.
Yeah, that's the exact same song that Nancy Sinatra sings on, just she's singing different lyrics on it, but it is the exact same arrangement. But the story behind this song is really fascinating, right? So Chandler did obviously record this song in the 70s, but nobody knew about it, and it was until it was found in an archive in RCA in the 80s.
Wow.
And then they released it pretty much immediately, and it got a cult following really quickly.
Yeah.
They released it in vinyl. Which is fucking cool, man. Like,
it is, yeah.
But also weird that a song just vanishes. And there is actually, I've got a story about Moonraker, which is the next film, which is also just as perplexing and fascinating about a song which you can't hear because it may or may not exist.
Well, I'm not going chronologically here, but Alice Cooper is renowned for his track "The Man with the Golden Gun." This is kind of fun. I mean, it's almost definitely not suited since, you know, James Bond and 60s hard rock don't really marry. But as tunes go, it's not bad. I mean, given the Lulu tune that they went with, they were obviously flailing a bit during that movie. And yeah, okay, I agree that the Alice Cooper track would have not been as well suited as the Lulu one on paper, but it's a better song.
I think it's probably a better song. Both songs are really divisive, you know, and I think with good reason. Frankly, I find the Alice Cooper song quite annoying.
It's got a really nice kind of like do.
Yeah, I like that. I like that sort of vibe of it. But it's just the man with the golden gun in his pocket bit that he keeps repeating.
Yeah,
that does my tits right in. But I think it's quite interesting, this one. So
Too naughty. I mean, the thing is, The Man with the Golden Gun is famous because it was just such thinly veiled smut.
Yeah, pretty much. But so basically, what the story behind this song is kind of cool. So the studio actually courted Alice Cooper, and he decided to write the song before Barry had even started work on the score, and before they'd even thought about getting Lulu in. And the song was kind of just done on spec, and they were like, "Nah."
That's right.
And I think they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here, to be honest, because Barry didn't do the last film, he didn't do Live and Let Die because he was away doing another film. So this was like his return to the franchise. First of all, he was fucked if those were his two options, and our last song was Live and Let Die.
I know.
Like you're losing straight away.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the next film in the series is Moonraker. This is largely apocryphal, just by different interviews by various people that have been involved with Bond, right? But Moonraker was a song that was eventually recorded by Shirley Bassey. And there's a song called Moonraker, or it's called Think of Me. No one really knows. And apparently it might not exist, right? But John Barry said in an interview that he once worked with an American singer on the theme song for Moonraker, but it just wasn't working. Over time, it's kind of been heavily speculated that the American singer he's talking about was a guy called Johnny Mathis.
All across the land dawns a brand new morn. This comes to pass when a child is born.
Many suspected it was him, but part of the issue is that the actual master session for the Moonraker recordings is missing, entirely missing, so they don't know who sang on it. That includes Shirley Bassey's version as well, the master recording.
She's not upset about that.
Yeah. So if it is recorded, it is likely long gone. All we know is that Barry did say that he did record it at some point, and that there's a version of a song with lyrics by Paul Williams. Shirley Bassey's version has got lyrics by Hal David. And like I said, the American singer is likely Johnny Mathis. In an interview in the book, The Music of James Bond, Paul Williams actually says that he originally wrote the lyrics to the song, and pitched it to Frank Sinatra. And Frank Sinatra said yes, but had to step away from it for whatever reason. And it ended up being Johnny Mathis, and then eventually it became Shirley Bassey.
Just like the moonraker goes in search of his dream of gold, I search for love.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah. I think fairly uncontroversially, one of the best bits of music to ever be associated with James Bond never made the cut, and that's Blondie's For Your Eyes Only.
Imagine having two fucking cracking songs.
Oh,
for the
yeah.
film.
Don't look over my shoulder. I'm trying to read. Remember these intimate moments. Don't forget my privacy.
It is pound for pound one of the best Bond affiliated tunes. It just is. Like Blondie, also seems to have that sexy accompaniment. Debbie Harry totally fits with the Bond girl aesthetic, but the franchise was actually kind of veering away from cool at that point towards a sort of mainstream lame thing. So maybe it wouldn't actually have been that great a fit for the band, who still kind of quoted a lot of cool. The recording itself, because it was released, it came out in 1982 in the album Hunter. It sounds, or The Hunter, it sounds a bit underproduced, I think, the recording. Maybe that would have been tweaked had it made, the film fully. Apparently Blondie had actually refused to record the tune that Sheena Easton did.
Yeah, because Bill Conti wanted Blondie to do the song.
Yeah.
But they were like, no, we're writing our own song.
Exactly.
And then he
Yeah.
just said, well, no, that's not happening.
But as you say, the producers were spoiled for choice in that movie. Yeah, this would have been a great tune regardless.
Yeah, I think it's a good song. It's got the surf guitar. It's not the same motif as you get in other James Bond. Maybe that would have been changed when the producers get involved.
Yeah.
But it's got the same feel.
That's it. I mean, it would have been in that state, but then it would have been augmented and tweaked. I think it would have been very slightly better produced as well. Phyllis Hyman.
Phyllis Hyman?
Never Say Never Again.
I'll never say never again. There's no way to know the ways of love. I'll never say never again.
this definitely should have been a Bond song. It was apparently already approved for use, and then Michel Legrand sued over the usage of the rights, and it got trapped in basically legal purgatory. It comes right in with the title name check at the start. It's big, bombastic verses, totally fit. It maybe lacks a few Bond motifs, but given that was a kind of non-Eon,
you wouldn't be able to use them anyway.
Yeah, you wouldn't have really been using them. So, but that's actually a really potentially a very good entry into the canon. But
yeah,
would it have been canon anyway?
I guess the next one to mention is This Must Be the Place I Waited to Leave.
This Must Be the Place I Was Waiting to Leave, or Waited to Leave.
Yeah, by the Pet Shop Boys.
By Pet Shop Boys, also known as The Living Daylights.
Living Daylights.
Yeah.
Each morning after sunblast, feel the benefit, mental arithmetic. I waited by the star.
AHA got the gig for this one, and basically the Pet Shop Boys reworked this track and took that long name and re-released it on their album. Honestly, it's a pretty shite song. It's not them in Top Gear by any means, and it doesn't strike me as having like a Bond sound.
Yeah, so the story behind this is they were actually expecting to be asked to write the song for this film, so they started working on it.
Pet Shop Boys, by the way, played Glasgow last night.
Did they?
Yep.
I wonder if it was any good.
Well, I got sent a video of them doing Always on My Mind, and it looked fun. Hell of a lot of phones getting raised, though.
Yeah.
A lot of people sitting down too. I think it was a seated gig.
Oh.
That's not what you want.
But so they were expected to get asked to do it, so they started working it, and they kind of did the skeleton of the song, and then eventually John Barry came back because he hadn't agreed to come back. Although the last film was he did the song with Duran Duran. You can tell from the documentary, I don't think he had a great time working with them.
It doesn't seem like he got on very well with any of the new bands.
With any bands, really, period. But Duran Duran said that the experience of working with him, even though he was a dick, was actually pretty good. AHA, on the other hand, we'll come to that. But when John Barry was decided to come back, the producers were like, nah, sorry boys, you're off. And that's when they decided to complete the song, put lyrics to it, and then put it on their album, which is why it's probably not very Bondy. It's got some of the where you could imagine the big orchestral vamps. It's got like keyboard synth strings in it in places, I think. And obviously nowhere near as bombastic.
Yeah.
So you can kind of hear when it might have gone.
It's pretty tepid.
But it is pretty tepid, yeah. I did mention it earlier on. I want to mention it again. License to Kill, James Bond theme 89 by Eric Clapton and Vic Flick.
Yeah.
Michael Kamen was a composer on this, and Michael Kamen is actually a really interesting guy. He actually did the orchestration and arrangement and conduction of S&M by Metallica, but he worked with loads and loads of other bands like Queen and all that. He always did a lot of orchestral stuff for rock bands, so they brought him in to do the score for License to Kill, and he wanted to do basically what John Barry had done for Dr. No, and wanted the theme to be the theme, and he went away and asked Eric Clapton and Vic Flick to re-record it.
Interesting.
And eventually the studio decided to go with Gladys Knight and her writing crew. So
Here's a belter though. GoldenEye.
GoldenEye. I love the story behind this. I don't know.
Which the track was renamed Juvenile, and it was by, it's been mentioned on the podcast before, Ace of Base.
GoldenEye is the place where the night is so cold. The GoldenEye is the key to the end. Always believe the GoldenEye is the place where.
So it actually came out, and they're revered by this podcast, album named Da Capo.
Da Capo.
I mean, like, honestly, let's just dispense with any pleasantries here. This is a shitty band with shitty voices, so this is a weird choice for Bond, right?
We're in the 90s. Nothing is the same. The Cold War is replaced by different actors using different names. GoldenEye is the place where the night is so cold.
I mean, they have the lyrics in this tune, we're in the 90s. Nothing is the same. They're fucking clueless.
Didn't the Capo come out in the early 2000s?
No, and it was 90s.
Was it?
Oh, fucking maxi 90s. The track is fucking terrible, honestly. I refer back to my earlier comment about how everybody in the past was a moron, right? The backing track on it sounds like a Bontempi keyboard preset.
It probably was.
It's fucking terrible. Imagine this had been chosen over the Tina Turner song.
You can hear.
Oh my fucking God.
You can hear their demo on YouTube.
Yes.
The GoldenEye.
Take us to the end. I used to like you as a friend.
So that's floating about. The song is really fucking bland. I think if it had strings on it and stuff like that, it might actually sound okay. But all over on the whole, though, it doesn't sound very Bondy. So really interesting bit of trivia here, right? At this point, Bond's been gone for 6 years due to various licensing disputes and all that, and the producers very much want to make him cool again. So they bring in a younger Bond, Pierce Brosnan, who was actually originally the second choice for Timothy Dalton. First was Sam Neill.
That's right, aye.
Brosnan couldn't do it back then because of a TV show, Remington Steele.
And by the time Brosnan did do it, he wasn't all that young.
Yeah, so essentially what happened is the Ace of Base were really hot at this period. They just released, all the She Wants and all that.
Don't we know it?
Yeah, and they really, really wanted to work on this film because they thought that if the film was a success, it would make them a bigger success. But the record label were like, no, this film's going to be shit, it's going to tank, you're not doing it. And that's why they didn't do it.
Wow.
Do you know who did it instead? Bono on the Edge.
That's right, aye. I know. We'll definitely get to that. So Eon really hedged their bets on Tomorrow Never Dies. He had so many fucking options for this film. You told me earlier that's because it was an open call?
Yeah, so they brought in David Arnold, who would then become the next shepherd of the Bond score and theme. Eric Serra was the one guy who did the score for GoldenEye, so again, kind of breaking musician. But I guess they felt as though they wanted to have like a sonic identity. But they didn't give him an opportunity to write. Well, actually, I say that. They didn't give him an opportunity to write a single. They did give him an opportunity to write a song, and it is in the film. It's the song Surrender by KD Lang, which is played over the end credits.
Your life is a story.
Significantly better than the Sheryl Crow song that actually is.
Well,
here.
let's talk about that in a little bit of detail.
But this was an open call, and it led to 12 submissions, 7 of which...
14, I heard.
Oh, well, 7 of which have only ever actually been...
Do you know
unveiled.
what one of them was? And I found this out again from the folk at the printing shop
What was
at
that?
the end of the road, courtesy of Neil, who works there. Chris Rea.
Oh, really?
How far can you go? Don't you know how strong is the shadow?
Wow.
Apparently. Yep.
That's interesting. But some of the ones that are out there are the KD Lang song Surrender, which was in the film. Tomorrow Never Lies by Pulp. Tomorrow Never Dies by Saint Etienne.
Tomorrow Never Dies by Swan
Lee. Fatal Shore by The Fix. Tomorrow Never Dies by Duran Duran, which was later released as The Last Day on Earth on their Pop Trash album. I'm actually not sure if that song was ever really going to be a Bond song because it's fucking hot. It sounds like a new metal song. Tomorrow Never Dies by Dot Allison, but she was then rejected and she re-recorded it or rewrote it.
With a little courage in time, you might forgive me. With a little loving.
I don't know who she is, by the way, but she is. I think she's local. And Mark Almond wrote one, which I've never seen the light of day either.
I mean, let's go back through a couple of them, right? And we'll start with KD Lang. By the way, stylized KD Lang, all lowercase.
All lowercase,
Yeah, like Bell Hooks. I didn't know that. The track Surrender.
have the power to make you surrender. Not only your body.
This was effectively relegated to the end credits in favour of Sheryl Crow's track.
That's staggering to me.
And I got to say, yeah, it's a crime it wasn't used.
Tomorrow never dies. Surrender. Tomorrow will arrive. On time, I'll tease and tantalize.
There's a version of the credits with this set to it, and it is absolutely perfect. Like, K.D. Lang's vocal is bang on Bond, and you know, whilst musically, objectively, I couldn't give a shit about this song. In the context of Bond, it is remarkable that it never made it, especially given I've got some concerns with Sheryl Crow's delivery in her tune. You know, I mean, why the fuck did they not just keep this in the tank and use it for a later film as well?
I know. Yeah.
You mentioned Pulp, Tomorrow Never Lies.
Each morning brings you closer to your goal. So grab your chance, don't let it go. The city streets are littered with the casualties.
I mean, that's fucking hopeless. Who even suggested that? It's a breathy performance. It sounds like Jarvis Cocker's taking the piss out of the entire premise.
It does.
Just cause his delivery. I mean, Pulp don't really do bombastic because all of their strings are these crap synth settings. That would have been an absolute piss take. St. Etienne's Tomorrow Never Dies is a bit more earnest.
Out of the city lights, where only I can hear promises. All he ever makes are promises.
You can watch that one with the credits to the film.
I thought it was really boring, that song.
Aye, it highlights what a terrible idea it would have been. It's not the worst song in the Bond universe, but it's such a non-event. It completely lacks any real impact or any of the relevant themes, other than there's a very brief nod during the bridge to a Bond pattern. It's such mealy-mouthed 90s British indie as well, with just these weak, I mean, the chords are almost jaunty as well, which is just not appropriate. It's a bullet dodged, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah. I did listen to the Swan Lee one.
Stars in the night is all I see, and the gloomy moon is beaming out for me.
And
Yeah.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Also Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah.
It's a Danish band I'd never heard of. Did okay in Europe, pretty well in Europe actually, but not much here.
It's kind of got it's got that Langwood kind of swing feeling that a lot of Bond themes have. The vocal's quite different from what you would expect. It's more Bjork than anything else in terms of, you know, how, you know, the kind of delivery of it, and the tone of her voice.
I mean, I think it totally works. I
It
can
does
see
totally
it
work.
haven't hit the mark.
Yeah, the strings are really lush. It's got that romantic feel that a lot of the 70s ones and 80s ones had.
Yeah, it's a wee bit undercooked in the terms of production, but again, that's the kind of thing that had it made the final cut, I'm sure there would have been an extra layer of work done to it. It's got a good kind of blend of sexuality and minor key sass.
Yeah.
It's pretty on point. Is it better than the Sheryl Crow tune? Maybe not, but there's not much in it.
Yeah. Last Day on Earth or Tomorrow Never Dies. There's a lot of big electric guitar riffs and electronics and that, and the chorus does kind of soar, but I find it hard to believe it was ever in serious contention, if in contention at all. It doesn't
Listen,
feel like
come
Bond.
on, guys, you fucking had your shot.
Had your shot, and it was way better than this.
Yeah.
And then the Dot Allison one was kind of cool. It's a kind of slow and pretty song. As it builds, it incorporates more electronics. I've written here it's a thin slip of a song, and I think that's a really good way of describing it. Really nice vocal performance and really nice melody. I would like to have heard what the original version of it sounded like, because it may be more dramatic. This song does not have any drama to it at all, really. Yeah, and there are others.
Dot Allison, as you say, is from Edinburgh.
Yeah.
She's been going since the late 90s. Did a bit of electronic music and fronted a band called Wind Dove.
Cool.
But there you go.
And then, like we said, there are others. Maybe Chris Rea, Mark Almond definitely did one. No one's really heard it, so that we don't really know who else contributed. But
they had lots of options.
Yeah, they binned the idea of doing an open call for the next film.
Yeah.
Clearly,
The world couldn't take it.
A great idea. The World's Not Enough. There's a song called "The World's Not Enough" by an English indie band called Straw.
No, you know what? I had to look up Straw's artwork, and I totally remember it.
You've learned to live
choose how to die. Everybody's wanting dead or alive.
I mean, it's not like it's a brilliant album cover, but I do remember when that was out and about and a thing. They're, as a band, they're kind of described as post-Britpop, so this must have been like almost a big break for them. They're from Bristol, this band. They were consummate Nearly Men. They split after a big Glastonbury show. They had some sort of falling out, and they never really had a hit. It's big kind of alt-pop, a wee bit like Top Loader, but on ketamine. You know, it's dead drowsy.
The world is not enough. Kiss, kiss, bang, bang. The world is not enough. Kiss, kiss, bang, bang. The world is not enough.
I'm not sure how they even got the offer for this. Do you notice, by the way, their version of the tune includes the lyrics "Kiss, kiss, bang,
It
bang."
does, yeah. It's got a lot of references actually in it, different Bond things. The song doesn't sound like the band you described, though. It sounds like an actual Bond song with the strings and the chorus.
Yeah,
and all
I mean,
that.
that's it, and it totally works in the context of Bond. I don't particularly like it as a song, but it's absolutely relevant. I mean, again, we'll discuss how it compares to the Garbage track that actually was chosen, and I mean the track by the band Garbage that was actually chosen. And again, I would just like to point out, lest we remind you that you could easily fit the words "the world is not enough" into the space of "tomorrow never dies."
Yeah.
Therefore, they could have used KD Lang's song.
Yeah, the world is... Yeah, that's cool. And then the last, well, there's a couple. There's Radiohead, which I guess we'll talk about in a bit.
Yes,
But
we shall.
Before that, Die Another Day, a band called Red Flag did a song called Beyond the Ice.
Involves killing, sorrow that dies beyond the ice. Beyond the ice.
Apparently the original title for the film was Beyond the Ice. So there's some speculation around this song. So apparently the fact that it could be a Bond song hinges on the fact that it's got that title, and it's also got a lot of references to Bond in it. It's about 10 million times better than the fucking Abomination that Madonna just cooked up out and fucking shat out.
Oh, man.
It's way more brooding. It's almost industrial in places. It's actually kind of feels. It actually has that kind of.
Could they have done any worse than the Madonna song?
I know, right? This one, it's not Madonna, I guess, but I think production-wise, it sounds like Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails. It's very much of the time in alt music, and I think it would have been a bold choice, and I would have liked to have heard it with a big production.
Yeah,
but yeah.
We mentioned Shirley Bassey and No Good About Goodbye. I mean, I think it's a good bit better than the Jack White, Alicia Keys tune that made it.
Does a heart stay broken? How long? If pain's unspoken, no solace in a kiss, no comfort.
It's mournful and it's better suited to the kind of grimier later James Bonds. One that we nodded to earlier on as we crack on through the films, Skyfall. Skyfall. Well, the track Supremacy by Muse. The band really pushed for this to be considered, right? There's a cut of the opening credits on YouTube that shows that it does click really quite well at points. It was actually used for the first Skyfall trailer, though. So when Skyfall, I remember seeing that at the cinema, and it was Muse that was on it, and it was this tune that was used for that trailer, yet it never made it into the film. And I remember assuming that was going to be the song, and it wasn't.
Don't have long I am on to you. The time
As much as Muse do my tits in, as our episodes will clearly illustrate, this definitely works. But to be honest, Muse were really up against it in this one, because Adele's Skyfall was fucking on the money for a James Bond song. Also, I do think the guitar's a bit loud for a Bond track. It would have needed a remix to make it a bit more orchestral. That said, I mean, Muse were not averse to a big pompous orchestral song, but fuck Muse anyway.
I mean, they do hint at that pompous orchestralness in this song. You can hear it with some of the chord choices and
This episode brought to you by Progressive. Whether you're driving, cooking, or doing laundry, Progressive knows the podcasts you listen to go best when they're bundled with another activity, much like how their Progressive home and auto policies go best when they're bundled. Having these two policies together makes taking care of your insurance easier and could help you save too. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save over $775 on average. That's a whole lot of savings and protection for your favorite podcast listening activities, like going on a road trip, cooking dinner, and even hitting the home gym. Yep, your home and your car are even easier to protect when you bundle your insurance together. Find your perfect combo. Get a home and car insurance quote at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $779 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
the way the progression is written. And I guess the last one to talk about is Spectre by Radiohead.
Spectre by Radiohead. Let's first contextualise this by remembering reluctantly the dreary shrug of a Sam Smith song that was actually chosen.
I've been here before, but always hit the floor. I've spent
Oh, jeez.
This track was labelled, quote, too miserable by the movie producers, which it is undeniably quite miserable.
It's Radiohead. What did the fuck did you expect?
So is Sam Smith's song.
Yeah.
It does tick a lot of the boxes, though. The lyrical nods, the name check right in the title. I think it was Sam Mendes at one point lamented the fact that he wasn't able to use it, and it was actually deemed too distracting. That's a quote.
He tried to use it in
during the film,
Mm-hmm.
but it kept drawing people out of what was going on. I'm actually not personally convinced this is a good Bond theme at all, but neither was Sam Smith's. But we can go into a wee bit more detail on the Radiohead stuff.
my hunger burns a bullet hole. Spectre of my mortal soul.
This is a really interesting segue for me, because I did not expect Radiohead, as I said, to be a band that would want to be involved with James Bond. But it turns out they first submitted a track called Man of War back from like Between the Bends and the OK Computers sessions.
You're my
It's a really good song, actually. I'm surprised it didn't actually make an album. It couldn't be used as a James Bond song, though. As a James Bond or any movie motion picture song that wants to be considered for an Academy Award has to be original. It has to be written for that. It can't have been written or performed prior. And even though Man of War had only been released on live recordings, that disqualified it. Daniel Craig, by the way, is apparently a really big Radiohead fan, and he went and met the band specifically to have conversations in relation
I
to
think
this.
he just wanted to meet them.
Yeah, I think he did, yeah. Radiohead, after that, having that tune rejected, went off and composed Spectre, but supposedly did that without making it clear that they were still working on the project. We talked about that earlier on with
Alice Cooper,
exactly, getting a little bit too eager. And because Radiohead because the producers didn't know they were doing that, they picked up the conversation with Sam Smith. There's an extensive video on YouTube that breaks this song down, both kind of technically and gives you a bit of the context around it. And I will say, it's made by someone who's clearly a very big Radiohead fan.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an eye roll. But there's some interesting stuff in it. So the main motif of Spectre, the song, is sort of an inverse of the Bond pattern. The Bond pattern goes up then down. This one kind of goes down then up. Yeah. Contrary to that video, though, as I said, I think the tune's not really very well suited to Bond. I think it would have been terrific scoring.
my hunger burns a bullet hole. The spectre of my mortal soul.
Mendes saying they couldn't fit it in because distracting. I think the film's worse off not having this in it, at least during the movie. It would fit with the on-screen action, definitely. But as a totemistic tune to represent the film, I think it would be far too easily lampooned as being dreary. You know, Radiohead do leave themselves open to that criticism a lot.
Absolutely, 100%.
It does not, for me, capture the essence of James Bond. You know, maybe it is maybe a needlessly complex and verbose interpretation of Bond as some sort of troubled anti-hero, and I get that that's what the later films were going for, but let's be honest, that's pretty myopic in the wider pantheon of Bond. You know, it's pretty selective. That's not James Bond for a lot of people. Bond is easily every bit as comical and as lecherous and as cringeworthy as he ever was deep and troubled in the later movies. So I think there's a little bit of like Radiohead not really subsuming their own musical ego in favour of the character, and that's something you do get. Certain artists, when they get involved in Bond films, have a lot of clout, and actually sometimes I think that clout can mean that it doesn't work quite as well because their identity is too strongly imposed on something that I think has to be a bit more of a compromise. So this is a very serious, very ponderous song, and I just don't, I do take on board that's what the later ones are going for, but I don't think it's entirely fitting.
Yeah, I think Radiohead's got a different story about how it all panned out, you know, which is probably worth mentioning as well, and the truth is obviously somewhere in the middle. They were told rightly that it was too dark, and Tom York said it was just politics was the reason why I didn't get it, which kind of leads you to think that they thought that they were always in with a chance, you know, which, as Sam Mendes says, seemed like they never really were because they didn't know they were working on it in the first place. So I think after having Adele as your song, your Bond song, I think they kind of switched on a lever of we're going back to pop artists, or we're actually going to go all in on pop artists. Because it's also worth noting as well that when the Adele song came out, that had been the first time since since Sheryl Crow, that they hadn't had the person involved with the score even involved with the song in any capacity, you know.
Yeah.
And even then, with Tomorrow Never Dies, David Arnold did write a song with K.D. Lang anyway. Do you know what I mean? So really, I guess it has been since GoldenEye that you haven't had the composer work with the lead artist on the song.
Yeah. It's you're losing a little bit of that joined upness.
Yeah, and that continues for that. That was Adele and Sam Smith. Tomorrow Never Dies, it's a bit different. It actually works in reverse, which I thought was quite interesting, and we'll get into that in the next episode. But I wonder if they'll unwind that or if they'll keep going down that route going forward. It's hard to say. I mean, if you're trying to appeal to a new and younger audience, then it makes total sense to bring in these kind of artists like your Adele, your Sam Smith, your Billie Eilish, you know what I mean, if that's what you want to do.
It's clearly what they want to do because they absolutely whore the life out of it.
Yeah, but they don't make films that young people really want to see though.
That's maybe just them being a bit clueless. There's one last almost track that I think we should mention. It comes for the recent movie. It's by Skylar Grey. I'm not too familiar with Skylar Grey, but the track I'm a Soldier.
Like a sniper in the tree. Somehow I knew I'd be pulled back.
She's on Linkin Park's label As It Happens, and I think it's definitely better than the Billie Eilish effort. Obviously the producers were looking for additional benefits, just from what you were saying there, you know, they want to tap into the youth market, and Billie Eilish, even though she's a relatively new act, has an unbelievable amount of like cultural currency. Having her involved in the film switches a whole bunch of people onto the film that Skylar Grey probably does not, and gets, you know, increased traction on social media and whatever, which are clearly the metrics by which success is measured these days in Hollywood. The Skylar Grey one I think makes a lot more musical sense, but I think at this point I'm just screaming into the void because I don't think they really were making a lot of good decisions with the soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, apparently Billie Eilish and Phineas did have to audition, and they didn't know they'd got it until they were flown out to meet fucking Hans Zimmer, which feels like bad practice to me, and that actually speaks to the whole Radiohead experience as well, from the sound of things. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe we'll do something and then just not communicating with them. I actually think that's probably, with the Spectre story, that's probably where the truth is maybe in the middle there. Maybe it wasn't made clear to Radiohead that they weren't getting the gig, but they just continued on anyway. And with Billie Eilish and Finney said written the song and then didn't hear about it.
Yeah, that's
know,
probably true.
so-
I still think Tom York and whoever else in the band thinks it has been incredibly naive if they thought that song was going to be a good fit or a success as a Bond song. I just don't think that was realistic.
Yeah, I try to put myself in their shoes when I think about that, because from their perspective,
Their
it's like,
shoes are the Radiohead and they think they can do no wrong.
yeah, but like they must be thinking they're in with that they're writing the best. They want a Radiohead song, you know what I mean? And
But there are Radiohead songs and there's Radiohead songs.
I was going to say there's a version of Radiohead that would have written the song.
Absolutely.
And I don't think the version of Radiohead that exists now, or the band.
Writing Pyramid song is not the Radiohead that James Bond needs. And I have a lot of respect for Radiohead. I really enjoy a lot of what they do, but no, fucking get over yourselves.
I mean, it's pretty clear that if they gave them Man of War,
Man of War's a much better
They
fit.
wanted that Radiohead, but that band ceased to be in that Radiohead like 20 years before that. You know what I mean? So probably was a bit of miscommunication there. But from the Billie Eilish story, it seems as though that might be a little bit par for the course.
Exit
you know?
music from a film, as miserable as it is a better fit.
Yeah.
You know.
But
anyway,
I just don't. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't quite like the way they seem to be treating artists in this process.
yeah, it's maybe not entirely down to arrogance. It's also maybe it sounds like there's a lot of like cooks spoiling the broth. Maybe a lot of studio this and Eon that and producer this and music producer that, executive producer this. Fucking a lot of people to keep happy. It wasn't. What's the word? It wasn't such a bureaucratic process back in the day with Broccoli and Stoltzman. It was like, yeah, they'll make the call, and then you had John Barry and he'll make the call. You have far fewer people, and so far less bullshit and far fewer gaps in the sofa for the fucking answers to fall down. Anyway, part 1, complete side A of the James Bond special. I have to try and come up with a catchy name for this, Mark. Yeah, the history covered, a bit of the technical stuff covered, some of the tracks that didn't make it covered, and some of the tracks that we personally and our subscribers think would have been good suggested. Next episode, we're going to get into the actual canon of James Bond songs.
The theme, there's not the themes of the songs.
It's difficult, right? We
Yeah,
haven't
it's
even nailed that. The songs that were the flagship for each movie. We'll go through them, maybe give them a wee rating, and pick our favourites, our least favourites, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to go to the toilet and do a 001.
Me too.
You're going to do 002?
No, 001. 001.
Right, see you back here.
Bye.
You know when you're listening to a true crime story that has an unbelievable plot twist that makes you stop in your tracks? That's what our podcast, People Are the Worst, brings you with each episode. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Rebecca. We're identical twins who love true crime cases that make you say, didn't see that coming, and we hate the people responsible for them. Listen to People Are the Worst now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.